Well everyone, the Google Pixel 4 XL was a flagship from Google back in 2019, so let's go and see how this phone holds up in 2023 and see if it's still worth buying almost 4 years later. Now, if you want to buy some phones I would recommend this year, links will be down in the description. You get this phone from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside, the Pixel 4 XL was coming from the Pixel 3 XL, which I think was a very weird device. I think it looked very weird on the front. Internally, it wasn't really that bad of a phone at that time, but definitely the outside was the one thing Google really needs to fix. And in this case, I will give them credit, they did fix this phone screen coming from that phone. So 6.3-inch OLED display. It was a 90Hz panel, which was the first time we saw 90Hz on these phones, which was really nice. You had a little bit of tiny bezel at the very top. The bottom bezel was pretty much not there. And I will say that the design of this phone actually wasn't that bad. Like, it actually felt pretty good in the hand. It didn't feel like a cheap phone by any means. And at that time, this was probably one of the more premium feeling Pixel phones that Google made. The original Pixel was really premium for, at the time when it was released. And I feel like this phone, for what it was, it really wasn't that bad of a device in my opinion. And that panel itself was actually pretty good. Now on the bottom, we had that USB-C port, which was awesome. And on the back, we had this like glass aluminum back kind of thing. For some models, like I used to have this orange model one, and it's funny because that thing actually didn't feel that great, which was very weird. It felt like kind of like this kind of matte texture that didn't really feel that nice. The glass ones though feel very good, like this one that I have. I actually like this one a lot, and I do think it holds up very well in that standpoint. So in that perspective on the outside, it definitely feels like a pretty premium phone. You had that dual camera setup on the back, you had wireless charging, you had IP certification, and overall this was definitely, I think, a huge step up from their previous generation of phones. And this was probably the weirdest one that they made, probably be less than the Pixel 3 XL, but the reason why I would say the Pixel 4 XL wasn't really that popular or people weren't really happy about it was two things. One, the camera, and two, the price tag. For every other phone in the market as of this time, you have to look at basically the other phones that were released, the competitors. We had the Samsung Galaxy S10s that year, we had the OnePlus 7 Pro that year, and we had the iPhone 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max that year. Those were probably the best phones those manufacturers made up until that moment. The Pixel 4 XL, on the other hand, really wasn't there. I mean, it was pretty much the same price as those other ones, and those other phones were already going down in the used market where this one just got released later that year. So it really wasn't the phone that a lot of people were thinking about, I guess, because there were already so many great phones that came out that year. So it's always one thing to keep in mind. Now in that camera department, this was probably the one area where this phone probably fell, the hardest. And it's kind of sad because the Pixels were known for their like top tier cameras. In this case, not so much. So on the back of this specific phone, it was a dual camera setup. So we had a 12.2 megapixel wide angle lens and then a 16 megapixel telephoto lens. And then we had an 8 megapixel wide angle lens. Now that camera doesn't really sound that bad. But you have to remember, this is the XL version. This is the more premium model. A majority of manufacturers as of that point used to already have, like, if you were getting the top tier model, you were already getting a triple camera setup. Now, to give you some perspective on this, the iPhone 11 Pro could shoot 4K at 60 videos on the back and 4K at 60 on the front, and it could shoot, with a telephoto lens and an ultra-wide sensor. That phone had a triple camera setup. The Galaxy S10, triple camera setup as well. Same thing, 4K at 60 on the back and the front. The Google Pixel 4 XL, which was like known for its camera, and this is where the one area where Google just focused in on their presentations all the time. It had the ability of shooting 4K at 30 on the back, which was already a downgrade from the iPhone 11 Pro and the Galaxy S10, but it could only shoot 1080p video on the front of this phone too. You can't have a phone that's supposed to be like the best camera or known as the best camera and solely rely on the software. I think from the original Pixel to like this specific Pixel 4 XL, there was no increase in the resolution or frame rate, filming, anything like that. It was pretty much the same exact resolutions we can film in. And I feel like that was kind of a big issue. That could have been probably one of the biggest problems with this specific phone. And I feel like if Google were to just focus in and kind of adjust and fix those things, I think that would have made this phone way better. Unfortunately, the camera department, I think it's good. Like, it'll get the job done for the majority of people out there. But again, when compared to the competitors, even of that year, it just didn't really hold up too well. And even the previous generation of phones, like, they weren't really that big of a difference either. So in the camera department, that kind of covers it up there. In the software department, this was actually probably one of the better areas of this specific phone. So it started off with Android 10. It is going to be getting, it already got Android 13. I think it might be getting Android 14 as well. I'm not 100% too sure, but this phone is still going to be lasting for a little bit of time. But do keep in mind this phone's not going to be lasting forever. And this is probably going to be one of the other things to keep in mind with this device, is that if you actually pick it up, do keep in mind this isn't going to be the most up-to-date performing phone of all time. Even if it gets Android 14, it's probably not going to be getting Android 15, and that is probably going to be one of the last updates this phone is going to get. Now, if you're willing to custom ROM this thing and kind of go down that direction, that's a completely different story. But if you're not, then you might as well just want to go ahead and kind of stick with the, maybe a phone that is still supported, like a Pixel 5 or Pixel 6 or something like that. But beyond that, I do think the software of this phone is probably the best thing with this specific device. So that kind of covers it up in the software department. Now in the performance department, this phone back then had that Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 chipset, which was pretty good back then, and it had 6 gigabytes of RAM. Now, starting with the RAM, I like that, RAM increase. I think the previous Pixels had 4 gigabytes of RAM. This one did have 6, so that's kind of a lot. It's definitely not the most, but I definitely do think that is a good thing that this one had going for it. Now, I remember when I was using this phone back then, it was a really good phone. Like, it felt very fast and it felt very smooth. And with Android as, its own operating system, like, it's very, very, like, it just doesn't really take too many resources for it to handle things. So I really like that about this device, and that made me very, very comfortable of pretty much owning and using this phone. Now, I didn't use this phone as my main device, but from, second channel videos that I started doing around the time this phone came out to other things that I did, this phone, handled pretty much everything I threw at it, which was really nice. So I will tell you, from the performance perspective, it isn't a bad performing phone. Like, it's still pretty good, and it's shocking how smooth this phone is. It's a little big in the hand for me, so sometimes like actually using it feels a little clunky, but it is a very smooth phone. It does not feel like a bad performing phone at all. And if you're playing games or whatever, it's going to do the job. Do keep in mind, it's not going to be like the fastest performing phone anymore. It is kind of like an older chipset. It is an older chipset, but I definitely do think that 90 hertz display actually does help out a lot. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. The battery life was probably one of the worst aspects of this phone too. It was a 3700 mAh battery, and by that point, a lot of other phone manufacturers had bigger size batteries than that on similar size, I think even smaller phones than that, which was pretty wild. So I think the iPhone 11 Pro Max actually had a bigger size battery than that too. I could be mistaken, but I just definitely think that Google kind of dropped the ball when it came down to this whole entire device. I don't think the Pixel 4 XL is like a bad phone. Like, I think it handled I feel like it was a good phone, but I feel like it wasn't a good phone for the price tag. I feel like Google could have done a better job when it came down to pretty much everything with that. And I feel like the performance, was great, but there were already phones with that chipset that came out way earlier that year, which had better features than this phone. Like, there wasn't a reason you would go buy a Google Pixel here than the software. And I feel like Google, this was the wake-up call from them, that they needed to go and, people weren't just going to go ahead and buy this phone because of stock Android and because of software updates. They were going to go ahead and buy this phone because of other features. And you look at the Pixel 4a that they released after this, I think that was a tremendous direction for them to go. Clearly, that was a watered down phone. It was a budget phone, but that's kind of what Google needed. The Pixel 5, again, they weren't trying to keep up and, kind of compete with the other phone manufacturers. They were just trying to go in their own lane and make a cheaper, good quality phone. And then now we have the Pixel 6 and 7s, and I think these are the best these are the best phones Google's ever made, in my opinion. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.